witnesses, and I do apologize, but I did achieve my goal on the defense bill, so I feel quite good about that. Byron, the question of public access to lands that Sea Alaska would acquire on Prince of Wales Island has been raised by some of the residents of local communities on that island. I have received letters that suggest that people have lived there in these lands and used these lands for 30 years. So if Sea Alaska should avoid land selections near these communities, or how's that going to work?
Sea Alaska has never posted its lands except in very specific instances for specific reasons. And this is over almost a 40-year period now. And we would not do so in the future. The legislation and the discussions and the agreements that Sea Alaska has reached with virtually all of the parties involved would make essentially unparalleled public access available through and onto Sea Alaska's lands. And Jaylene may have more specific answer if she might be given the opportunity, Mr. Chair.
Well, in fact, Byron, wouldn't it be fair to say that the Forest Service could prohibit use of that land? So it's supposedly federal lands. If it remains in the Forest Service hands, they could keep people off that land too. And you're not saying that's going to be done under your jurisdiction, correct?
We aren't saying that.
That's good. So, because the Forest Service, I know they have restricted before, and it's restricted uses, types of vehicles, etc. already. So I don't know why the concerns, and I get very concerned about those that say this is their right. This is not their right. And I know I've talked to people in Sitka and other areas, well, we've been doing these all these years. It's on federal land, and they have been restricted before. So I commend the Sea Alaska people for saying, yes, there will be utilization of that land. No structures, but utilization and for recreational purposes. Byron, again, and I introduced this bill in 2007, and it's been vetted throughout the region. I've made some allocations based on suggestions received, and there seems to be new criticism every time we introduce the bill. And can you describe the negotiation in communities and the work you've done trying to get a solution?
Sea Alaska has had almost 200 meetings throughout the region with individuals, with groups, with communities. It has been involved in the Tongass Futures Roundtable process, which has all of the interests in the Tongass National Forest at the table. The sacred sites, particularly the future sites, have been modified over the course of 3 Congresses, in which this bill has now been introduced. And we continue to this day to discuss and negotiate issues that others have a concern with. We feel that we have been fully responsive, fully transparent, and we are at a point where we are not sure how much more that in the interests of our tribal member shareholders, that we can give.
Well, I've watched this process. I'm deeply disturbed by those that keep saying something's wrong with the bill after you negotiate with them. My goal, Mr. Chairman, is to move this legislation as soon as possible. But Myron, you also said that this legislation is the most important and immediate economic stimulus package that Congress can implement for Southeast Alaska. We keep talking about jobs. What is the estimated jobs if this thing goes forth for that area?
At the very minimum, there would be hundreds of jobs. The opportunity to essentially reconstitute the core of a sustainable timber industry is what we're talking about. If this bill is not passed and Sea Alaska does not gain access to lands that it is entitled to, both for timber harvest and for other purposes, and I emphasize the other purposes, they are many, and they have to do with our existence in the forest. It is very likely that the timber industry will go away, and whether it will ever be reconstituted is problematic. I believe even the U.S. Forest Service recognizes that, and they are, I think, anxious that somehow the issues be resolved so that we can work together to build an industry that is sustainable over time.
Thank you, Byron, and my time is up, and I'll come back for a second round of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Mr. Kildee.
Mr. Maldich,